All right, welcome back to VulnGibes, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely. Always ready to dig into the latest security happenings.
Well, this time we're taking a close look at the recent Oracle Cloud breach. Pretty big one.
Yeah, this one's making some serious waves, that's
Hmm.
for sure. And I think, since everyone listening is already deep in the IT security world.
Yeah, we can skip the 101 on IR, ADT, and CK and all that, right?
Exactly. We're going to assume you're already familiar with kill chains and zero-day exploits and all that jazz. Let's get straight to the heart of what makes this breach so significant.
Perfect. So, to set the stage, on March 21st, 2025, CloudSEK's Vigil, they spotted this threat actor calling themselves Rose 87168. And get this, they were trying to sell like a massive 6 million records.
6 million records.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not small potatoes. And it wasn't just any data either. It was pulled straight from Oracle Cloud's SSO and LDAP systems.
The really troubling part is the kind of data they got their hands on. We're talking JKS files, encrypted SSO passwords, key files.
And even Enterprise Manager JPS keys, which,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, that basically gives you control over Oracle's management tools. Huge security implications there.
And potentially impacting like over 140,000 Oracle Cloud tenants. That's a lot of potential fallout.
And this Rose 87168 character, they weren't exactly new to the game either. Seems like they were active since January 2025.
Yeah, and apparently trying to strong-arm victims into paying up to get their data removed. They even hinted that they got in through some kind of undisclosed vulnerability on those, like login.region-name.oraclecloud.com subdomains.
Interesting. So even though this threat actor didn't have a known track record before this,
Right, no real public history.
CloudSEK's initial analysis, it suggests that these guys, or whoever they were pretty sophisticated in their methods. Definitely not your average script kiddies.
And CloudSEK, they focus their analysis on a specific subdomain, login.us2.oraclecloud.com. And wouldn't you know it, the threat actor actually claimed that Oracle took it down right after the breach. Makes you wonder, how did they get in there in the first place? What was the attack vector?
Well, luckily we have the Wayback Machine. Looking at the records, we see login.us2.oraclecloud.com was hosting Oracle Fusion Middleware 11G. Relatively recently, too, as of February 17th, 2025.
Okay, so kind of an older version of Fusion middleware. Anything suspicious there?
Now, this is where it gets juicy. Faux4 data revealed that this particular server hadn't been updated since around September 27th, 2014. Talk about a blast from the past, right?
Whoa, that's almost a decade without any updates. So with a system that old just sitting out there on the internet, what sort of vulnerabilities are we looking at?
Well, the analysis quickly pointed to a critical vulnerability, CVE 2021-35587. This one specifically impacts Oracle Access Manager, which is a key component of Oracle Fusion middleware.
CVE 2021-35587. Remind me again, what's so bad about this one?
This is one of those vulnerabilities that can really keep you up at night. It affects versions 11.1.2.3.0, 12.2.1.3.0, and 12.2.1.4.0 of Oracle Access Manager. And the scary part is, it's easily exploitable, even by unauthenticated attackers. All they need is network access via HTTP.
So essentially, anyone with an internet connection could potentially exploit this.
Yeah, pretty much. And if they manage to pull it off, they could completely take over Oracle Access Manager. And since SSO is, that central hub for authentication, that means they basically have the keys to the kingdom. Lateral movement? Oh yeah, it'd be wide open.
That's a pretty terrifying prospect.
Yeah.
Now, the threat actor, they actually mentioned to a news source that they used a known public CVE, but then they claimed there wasn't any readily available proof of concept code or any exploits. Did CloudSEK find anything to contradict that?
Actually, yeah. Despite the attacker's claim, CloudSEK's analysis did turn up at least one public exploit for CVE 2021-35587. It's possible that Rose 87168 was downplaying how easy it was to exploit this flaw, or maybe they meant there weren't any widespread, easy-to-use tools out there.
Right, makes sense. But still, the fact that this endpoint, this server that everyone could access, hadn't been updated in so long, it really points to a massive breakdown in patch management. Wouldn't you say that's the most likely way they initially got in?
Absolutely. Everything
Yeah.
lines up. The timeline, the nature of this vulnerability, the outdated software version, you leave a server vulnerable like that, running an old version of Oracle Access Manager exposed to the entire internet, well, it's practically begging to be exploited. And the type of data that leaked onto BreachForums, it fits perfectly with a compromise of Oracle Access Manager. So yeah, that's almost certainly how they got their initial foothold.
So we have a pretty solid idea of how they might have gotten in, But what proof do we actually have that this was a real large-scale breach? I mean, what if Rose 887168 was just bluffing?
Well, they didn't just talk the talk. They provided some pretty concrete evidence to back up their claims. For one, they released a sample list of customer details, which, by the way, parts of it have been independently verified.
Okay, so not just empty claims.
Right. Even more convincingly, they uploaded a file, and when experts analyzed it, they confirmed it was created on login.us2.oraclecloud.com. They even archived the public URL and put their email address right in the file. It's like they were saying, see? We were here.
Talk about leaving a calling card. And speaking of timelines, the activity on that compromised server seems to line up with what Rose 87168 said too, right?
Yeah, exactly. This server, the one we believe was hosting the SSO service, it was active for about 30 days before the breach became public. That matches up with what the threat actor said, that Oracle shut it down right before the news broke.
And there's even more evidence out there, and it comes from a surprising place. GitHub.
Oh, yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Researchers found a public GitHub repository, and it belonged to Oracle's official Oracle Quick Start organization. And within this repository, there was a script called mpapihelper.py, and guess what? It contained direct references to login.us2.oraclecloud.com.
So this wasn't just some random forgotten server. It was actively being used for important stuff.
Exactly. The script was used for OAuth 2 authentication and generating tokens for the Oracle Cloud Marketplace API. Definitely a key part of their cloud services.
And the GitHub trail doesn't end there, does it?
Nope, not even close. Researchers uncovered multiple other public repositories on GitHub, and these contained hard-coded credentials or even entire configuration details that pointed right back to login.us2.oraclecloud.com.
Wait, so actual login credentials were just sitting there out in the open on GitHub?
Unfortunately, yeah. And get this, several of the organizations whose information was exposed in these public repositories, places like sbgtv.com, nexinfo.com, nucore-jfe.com, cloudbasedsolutions.com, rapid4cloud.com, all those organizations were also on the list of tenants that the threat actor leaked. Talk about a smoking gun.
Wow, that suggests a pretty widespread problem with credential exposure in software development. Developers need to be way more careful about what they're putting out there in public.
Absolutely. It's a huge wake-up call for the entire industry. But it wasn't just code repositories. Even official documentation pointed to this vulnerable endpoint.
Really? Where else was it mentioned?
Well, there was a knowledge base article from OneLogin,
Right.
their big identity and access management provider. And in this article, they detailed how to configure their SSO solution with Oracle Fusion. And guess what endpoint they specifically mentioned?
I have a feeling I know the answer.
login.us2.oraclecloud.com. And to top it off, a file was found on the website of Rainfocus, one of Oracle's partners. And in that file, they also detailed SSO configurations using that same subdomain. So it's clearly being used in production SSO setups.
All of this evidence adds up to a pretty clear picture of what happened. But then things escalated even further on March 25th when the threat actor released a data sample.
Yeah, that really upped the ante. They released a 10,000-line sample of the stolen data. It gave everyone a much clearer look at the scope and nature of the breach.
So what did this sample reveal?
Well, it showed just how many organizations were actually affected. Even though it was just a small sample, it contained data from over 1,500 unique organizations. This wasn't just a small targeted attack. This was widespread.
So a huge impact then.
Absolutely massive. And the sheer volume and the way the data was structured, it all pointed to it being legitimate.
Right.
It looked like genuine data pulled straight from a bunch of different tenants.
So not just a bunch of fabricated data to scare people.
Right. And here's another interesting tidbit. Some of the tenant IDs in the sample had suffixes like dev and oldtest, but then others just had the base tenant name. This suggests that they might have had access to not just development or testing environments, but also to live production systems. That's a whole other level of seriousness.
That's definitely concerning. And it wasn't just corporate data that was leaked, was it?
No, unfortunately not. The sample also included a bunch of personal email addresses. This probably reflects the fact that more and more companies are using SSO for both employees and customers these days. So when a breach like this happens, it's not just the company that's affected, it's everyone who uses their systems.
And if there were any doubts left, this data sample was checked out by several independent security researchers.
Yet multiple researchers confirmed that it was the real deal. No question that a serious breach had occurred.
So after diving into all of this, what are the key takeaways for our listeners who are all, of course, already IT security professionals? What should they be taking away from this whole incident?
The biggest takeaway, and I can't stress this enough, is the importance of proactive patch management. I mean, think about it. This breach was likely caused by a vulnerability from 2021, a vulnerability that CISA flagged as being actively exploited back in late 2022. But in 2025, it was still unpatched on a public-facing server. This isn't just about staying ahead of the latest 0 days. It's about having a solid system in place to address known vulnerabilities, especially on critical infrastructure like SSO portals.
Absolutely. It shows how neglecting even known risks can come back to bite you, even years down the line. What else should we be paying attention to?
This incident really highlights the huge supply chain security implications that exist in software development. We found all those hard-coded credentials and sensitive configurations in public GitHub repositories, and they all pointed to that compromised endpoint in Oracle Cloud. It's a reminder that security isn't just about our own infrastructure. It's about the security practices of our development teams and making sure they're not accidentally exposing sensitive information in public places.
Right, it's a shared responsibility. Security needs to be baked into every step of the development process.
Exactly. Another takeaway. Single sign-on infrastructure is a prime target for attackers. When you compromise SSO, you're potentially getting access to a ton of interconnected applications and data. So we need to be extra vigilant about protecting these systems. They need to be rock solid.
It's like the master key to the entire kingdom.
Precisely. And let's not forget about the attacker in all this, Rose 87168. Even though they were relatively unknown before this, they were clearly very sophisticated. They knew what they were doing. This should be a wake-up call for all of us. We need to be proactive, we need to be hunting for threats, and we need to be constantly gathering intelligence, even about new and unknown adversaries.
We can't afford to be complacent, even if we think we're not being targeted by the usual suspects.
Absolutely. And finally, this whole incident really highlights how the lines between enterprise security and personal data are becoming increasingly blurred. We saw personal email addresses leaked in that data sample, and that's because so many companies are using SSO for both employees and customers. So when a breach like this happens, it's not just the company that suffers, it's everyone who uses their systems.
So this deep dive into the Oracle breach has really highlighted some critical issues. The dangers of unpatched vulnerabilities, the risks lurking in our code repositories, and the potentially devastating impact of SSO compromises.
It's a stark reminder that we need to be proactive, we need to be constantly monitoring our systems, and we need to have a solid defense-in-depth strategy. The fact that a vulnerability from 2021 could still be exploited in 2025 should be a huge wake-up call for everyone. We need to take vulnerability management and the entire software development lifecycle seriously.
Couldn't agree more. And with that in mind, we want to leave our listeners with a challenge. We saw how common hard-coded credentials were in those public repositories. So what can we do as an industry to better identify, prevent, and fix this problem? It's clearly a persistent issue, and we need some fresh thinking to tackle it. We also encourage you to look into CVE 2021-35587 in more detail and think about how it might apply to your own systems. Thanks for joining us on Vuln Vibes.
Thanks for having me.